Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller film named Nightwatch. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with Martin, a law student who lives quite frugally. To help ease the financial burden on his family, he recently took on a part-time job as a morgue night watchman. Although his friends disapprove of this job, Martin went ahead and reported to the hospital regardless. According to the previous watchman, this job seems almost legendary because a few years ago, that watchman became embroiled in the area's biggest scandal. He had turned the morgue into his personal playground, inflicting degrading acts on the corpses of female bodies. After someone accidentally discovered this, the twisted man continued lurking around the morgue for weeks. To avoid upsetting the families of the deceased, the doctors chose to keep this matter a secret, and eventually, the deviant disappeared without a trace. However, these are just rumors that are hard to distinguish from the truth. In reality, the job of a watchman is extremely dull. Most of the time, he simply sits in the office, enduring long nights. Occasionally, an alarm rings when someone trips the white line in the morgue, prompting him to call the on-duty doctor to check. This is one of the few moments of actual activity for the watchman. Since Martin took over, though, he hasn't encountered such incidents. So his job mainly consists of checking the status of each room, making sure the keys are in place, and turning off the lights before returning to the office to wait out the night. The former watchman took most of his belongings with him when he left, leaving Martin only a baseball bat for self-defense and a strange photograph. Martin felt quite puzzled about the photo's presence, but the previous watchman explained that it was something passed down from watchman to watchman. He was merely following tradition by passing it to Martin, assuring him that another photo in the office wouldn't disrupt anyone's life and thus didn't require much thought. Martin initially thought this job wouldn't interfere with his regular life, but shortly afterward, his troublemaking friend named Jens suggested a 2-week-long game. The rules of the game were simple. One person would make a demand, and the other had to comply. Failing to do so meant losing the game. The game allowed for either a win-win or lose-lose outcome. No matter who lost, they would immediately have to propose to their girlfriend and settle down. Martin felt puzzled, wondering why Jens would suddenly suggest such a strange game. One night, after getting drunk, Martin unintentionally overheard his friend's confession. It turned out Jens had recently met a peculiar woman who worked in the sex industry and was submissively devoted to him. To mess with her, he lied about his name, saying he was Martin, and even promised her that he would soon bring a friend to meet her for a special dinner. While Martin wasn't fond of interacting with other women, he also didn't want to lose the game. So under Jens's pressure, he reluctantly canceled a date with his girlfriend Kalinka and agreed to attend the dinner Jens had arranged. But before that, Martin had to work a night shift at the morgue. This particular night felt different. As a new body was brought in, the calm of the hospital was disrupted. It was the body of a woman who had been the victim of a serial killer. Recently, a horrifying murder had occurred in the city, and the victim was a sex worker who had suffered unspeakable torture before death. A portion of her scalp was even missing, apparently kept as a trophy by the killer. This case had initially been classified as the act of a lone psychopath, but tonight, with the arrival of a similarly brutalized body, the detective in charge finally declared it a serial murder case. The corpse bore dark, rotting scars, as if slashed repeatedly with a blade, with edges already turning black. Oddly enough, the detective seemed unfazed by the grotesque stench as he examined the body up close. The incident left Martin with a heavy shadow over his heart, further dampening his enthusiasm for the job. On the second night, an unexpected incident occurred in the morgue. The buzzing of the alarm suddenly sounded. When Martin cautiously went to check, he found the morgue door still open, with bright lights and the white line alarm continuously flashing. But as he drew closer, he saw Jens's face under the white sheet. It was all just a prank. Initially furious, Martin calmed down and realized this was Jens's unique way of showing concern. Martin had always been fearful of ghosts, and he often mentioned this during group gatherings, so Jens had devised this prank to help him confront his fears. After this experience, Martin felt more at ease and could even act politely at the next gathering. However, during the dinner, Jens's darker side started to show, turning the atmosphere sour. He forced a girl to perform a suggestive TikTok dance for Martin, used money to make her follow his instructions, and even wasted money recklessly while urging her to share personal experiences. One of her stories instantly wiped the smile off Martin's face. This was the most unusual experience in the girl's career. A client once paid a huge amount to have her pretend to be dead, draping a sheet over her body and even tying a unique tag to her toe, exactly how corpses were laid out in the morgue. At that time, she didn't agree to take the client home for safety reasons, leaving her roommate to entertain him. Tragically, this turned her roommate into a cold corpse, even having her carefully maintained scalp removed. Hearing this, Jens suddenly went pale, and Martin subtly signaled the girl to leave, returning home with a heavy heart. However, that night, Martin's girlfriend mentioned in her half-sleep state that the girl's calls had been coming to their home, indicating that Jens had shared Martin's personal information with her, even his appearance and personality traits. To get back at Jens for the inappropriate behavior, Martin orchestrated an argument between Jens and his girlfriend. Watching Jens get thoroughly scolded filled Martin with relief, even brightening his mood for his night shift. But upon entering the morgue, Martin was shocked to find that the victim's body had vanished, leaving bloody footprints across the floor, trailing from the morgue to the end of the corridor. Martin's good mood quickly disappeared, replaced by a creeping terror. When the on-duty doctor arrived, the body was already back in the morgue, and the bloodstains had completely vanished, as if everything had been a figment of Martin's imagination. The doctor, witnessing this, assumed that Martin was once again hallucinating. In a previous incident, Martin had mistaken the alarm clock for the morgue alarm, causing the doctor to rush unnecessarily. He suspected a similar situation this time. Though saddened by the doctor's doubts, Martin found comfort in the detective called by the hospital, who reassured him, explaining that Martin's intense desire to solve cases could sometimes lead to such illusions. The detective himself had experienced similar occurrences, emphasizing that Martin needn't feel guilty. Despite the reassurance, Martin still felt uneasy. Kalinka, trying to comfort her boyfriend, came to the hospital to stay with him for the night. They borrowed a knife left behind by the former watchman to make a midnight snack, then went on a patrol of the morgue together. Seeing the cold and silent morgue, Kalinka began to understand the level of fear Martin endured every night. Moved by both sympathy and love, they found solace in each other, leaving behind traces of warmth in the icy room. Little did they know that this would entangle them in even more trouble. The next morning, the girl from the previous night approached Kalinka, claiming Martin had tried to have her play dead and provide hormone services. Kalinka, enraged, realized that their late-night escapade had spurred Martin's peculiar interests. Watching his girlfriend's hurt expression, Martin felt immense sadness, but unwilling to lose the game with Jens, he could only try to reassure Kalinka with words. The argument with his girlfriend had already left Martin feeling irritable, and as he arrived at his shift, the irritation still hadn't faded. Soon, he noticed people in the hospital pointing at him as he passed, which left him confused until the detective escorted him to the morgue. There, he saw the body lying face down, and Martin suddenly realized he was being treated as a suspect in this disturbing incident. At the same time, officers were collecting genetic material from the walls. Despite the situation, Martin still wanted to hide his relationship issues, claiming only his innocence and refusing to reveal any details about the previous night. Seeing this, the detective tried to probe from other angles, aiming to reconstruct the events. Hearing the questions, Martin finally admitted the girl's presence, revealing she was the only link between him and the deceased. After listening, the detective concluded that the real culprit was likely someone else within Martin and the girl's shared social circle, like the mutual friend who introduced them. He speculated that this person had set Martin up, orchestrating everything to frame him. To help clear Martin's name, the detective said he would arrange genetic testing to prove his innocence. Martin felt touched by this gesture, knowing that while Jens had tried to harm him, the detective was actively trying to help. With this realization, Martin confronted Jens, asking him directly about his suspicions. Although Jens's behavior was less than respectable, Martin had always believed him to be loyal. But this time, the ploy related to a criminal case was too much, even for the usually forgiving Martin. The accusations Martin faced at the hospital left him unwilling to continue the friendship, so he left without looking back. Meanwhile, the girl was dancing in her apartment when, moments later, an ominous client barged in, tearing her clothes and producing a weapon he had meticulously prepared. He plunged it viciously into her undamaged flesh, and soon the floor echoed with the dripping of blood, her once pale feet stained in a crimson pool. Kalinka, unaware of this, had gone to the girl's apartment after hearing about Martin's alleged involvement, hoping to clear his name. But when she arrived, she found the door ajar, the radio playing eerie music, and no sign of the girl. Stepping quietly inside, she soon realized that blood had soaked the entire living area. At the end of the blood trail, she found the girl's tortured body. Kalinka, shaken, immediately called the police, but just then she glimpsed the reflection of a gloved hand on the white door behind her. She carefully put down the phone and stealthily left the scene. Moments later, the white door slowly opened and out stepped the detective, who had somehow cleaned up all traces of blood. He moved skillfully towards the girl, taking genetic material and marking her mutilated hand with Martin's name. Meanwhile, Kalinka returned home, only to see the detective's warrant for Martin's arrest, filling her with despair and pain. Jens discreetly called him, but the detective and his officers soon arrived, asking about Martin's whereabouts, stating that the girl had named him as the killer. This detail made Jens realize something was wrong. If the girl had truly believed Martin was the killer, she should have written down Jens's name, as they'd swapped identities in the game. Hearing this, Kalinka mentioned she had been to the crime scene and hadn't seen any names written, which prompted the detective to pause in thought. At that very moment, Martin was back in the office for his night shift. He had noticed the disappearance of the knife and was planning to search for it thoroughly, only to receive a call from Jens informing him that he was being framed once again. Shocked, Martin immediately contacted the former watchman, hoping to uncover more details about the infamous scandal. To his horror, the truth was far worse than he'd imagined. According to hospital rumors, the deviant who disappeared years ago hadn't been institutionalized but had escaped and continued his twisted deeds elsewhere. This revelation left Martin deeply unsettled, prompting him to rush to the hospital archives, where he looked up the records of former watchmen and their reasons for leaving. To his shock, he found that one former employee had the exact same name as the detective, and in the employment records his status read, "Never to be rehired." Panic flooded Martin's mind as he struggled to figure out how he could escape from the unfolding nightmare. However, Martin didn't have much time left, as the detective had already called, and within minutes, he pushed open the office door, announcing Martin's arrest, and even claiming that if Martin didn't try to attack him in the morgue, Kalinka would become his next trophy. At that moment, Kalinka, concerned for her boyfriend, arrived at the hospital alone. Seeing the blood-stained knife on Martin's desk, her heart sank. Just then, she noticed the morgue lights still on. When she reached the door, she witnessed the horrific scene of Martin's supposed attack, causing her to panic. She quickly fled with the detective, hiding in a glass storage room. Once she confirmed that Martin couldn't enter, the detective started humming the eerie tune from the girl's apartment. Within moments, Kalinka's chicken screams filled the air. Martin, witnessing his girlfriend's danger, shattered the glass door, but hesitated upon seeing the detective's poised knife. To ensure Kalinka's safety, he had no choice but to drop his bat and allow himself to be tied up. As the detective prepared to strike, the chief of police finally arrived, albeit with Jens in tow. Hearing the commotion, the detective swiftly hid the bat behind the wall, craftily ordering the chief to lock up Jens first. As the detective and the chief faced off, Kalinka realized Martin was unlikely to awaken soon. She quickly crawled through the shattered glass, enduring the pain of shards cutting into her flesh, and managed to reach the alarm. The alarm blared, and the detective immediately swung the bat at the chief, spraying diabetic blood across the room, staining it a gruesome sugar red. Unfazed, the detective locked Jens in the office and returned to the glass storage room, ready to claim his next trophy. Meanwhile, Jens managed to grab a knife, slicing through his restraints. After a quick makeshift bandage, he armed himself with the chief's abandoned gun and rushed to the storage room. The buzzing of a chainsaw echoed within, and in an instant, gunshots shattered the silence of the hospital. The detective was riddled with bullets, left bleeding out in a grotesque heap. The three survivors looked at each other, and finally, unable to hold back, broke down in crocodile tears. Though the game never declared a winner, shortly afterward, Martin and Jens both found themselves walking down the aisle. The ordeal with the detective had made them realize that a simple life with their loved ones was the most important thing. The end.